Episode 88. 88. This is the Patrick Kane episode, which means that all of us, the pressure's on to give a Hall of Fame worthy performance. And I don't know, looking around this virtual room, I'm feeling pretty confident that we might have the group capable of doing that. If you want a Hall of Fame performance, you have to start with the hardest working person in politics. That's State Senator Terri Bryant. She's with us yet again from the 58th District. She's the Assistant Minority Leader. Previously served in the House. She worked for the Department of Corrections, and I have a feeling that's going to come up in this episode. Terri, glad to have you.
Thank you. It's good to be here. And I'm always glad to talk about corrections.
I have a feeling we're going to hit your topics, and then my guest that I'll introduce shortly, we're probably going to have some of her topics too, as a former police officer. And I have a feeling some stuff's going to come up. But speaking of things that are going to come up, we've got an Army veteran, Susan Mantell. She's the chairwoman of the Champaign County Republicans. She's a physician. As I already mentioned, she's a veteran. I have a feeling she's going to have some strong opinions about some stuff. Susan, glad to have you.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really thrilled to be on here with these great people.
Speaking of great people, Sharon is with us, who is not only a policy expert, she was an elected official locally as the township supervisor in Palatine and a police officer. And as I said, I have a feeling she's going to have some strong opinions. I have a feeling people are going to need to hold on to their seats after this episode. Sharon, what's going on?
Not much. We miss you in the house, Terri.
Thank you.
We also have Core Strategies political experts. We have Michael Butler and Chris Jackowiak. Michael's been bringing the heat lately. Chris, are you going to let him beat you, or are you going to bring the heat this week too?
No, Collin, I think the golden age of America that's kicked off here is giving me the energy I need, and I'm looking forward to see you be very upset at many of the great policies coming out of the Trump administration that you so hate.
Well, we're going to spike Chris's his coffee or whatever it is he's imbibing over there with some Red Bull. All right, speaking of that golden age of America, let's jump right into our first topic. This is it's really more of a question for our panel, for our guests. Are we in that golden age of America? I love the positivity that I'm seeing with that sort of concept of the golden age of America. We haven't seen this a lot in politics. Usually it's negative, negative, negative. It's everything's so horrible. I don't know why we kind of rolled this out after Trump won. This could have been a great theme during the campaign. This golden age of America seems to be a big thing that Trump's pushing that doesn't seem to be going away. So I guess that's my question to you five. Are we in the golden age of America?
Well, I think we're going to have a great opportunity with this incoming administration. It's kind of a fresh start for Trump. You know, a lot of times your second term is kind of tumultuous and you're just trying to keep the wheels on, kind of situation. But he's got a, brand new cabinet. Seems like a lot of these appointees are going to kind of sail through, which is good to see. And I know we're all excited about what he's going to accomplish. And also, I think, also interesting and something that we can be extremely proud of as Illinoisans is that two of the cabinet members are U of I grads, which I know Susan is probably excited about, being from Champaign County. And John Ratcliffe, the CIA director, was confirmed today by the Senate, and he's a Carbondale High School grad. So that's something to be proud of, I think, as Illinoisans and as Republicans in this state. We're well represented in this cabinet.
Well, Illinois tends to export our bad politicians, so hopefully we're turning a corner.
No doubt.
Collin, I just got back from DC last night. We drove, so we took our time coming back. And one of the things that was interesting, I actually heard this on a news program recently, but I saw it happen. We were at an event in DC and coming back through like the bar area, and just a picture of Trump went up on the on the TV screen, and the whole bar erupted in cheers. People were beating on the bar, and that's in DC. Now I know that its inauguration is probably mostly Republicans that are all in there, but we did not see that 4 years ago. And so what's happening right now is real excitement and people not being afraid to act like they're excited.
Interesting.
So I just got back from DC as well. We also drove, and I saw Terry at the Oregon Ball of all things. But my husband and I stood for 6 hours in the line for the Trump rally. Sadly, we didn't get in, but it was amazing the number of MAGA and Trump supporters out there that just wearing their regalia everywhere. It was phenomenal. The energy, people willing to stand in line for hours. So I think it's up to we the people to maintain this actual positivity and support our president to be able to have a golden age. Because if we let it fall, it's really that's what's going to make it not work.
Well, what's interesting is you always see this with presidents in their second terms. The media tends to let up a little bit because they don't have to beat you anymore. You've gotten your 2 terms. You're not running again, so they're looking for whatever other Republican they need to start beating up so they can help the Democrat win next time. And you're already seeing that a little bit. Yeah, the media is still going after Trump. That's what they do, but you can almost tell that like the edge is off a little bit. They're just sort of like, all right, we're stuck with him for 4 years, but who now do we need to go after? Which, as you said, Susan, it may open up this opportunity here where more things can be accomplished and we maybe could keep a little more of that air of positivity, which would be huge.
Which another thing that I think is a little different this time is Trump seems to be like actually getting a honeymoon period. When he won the first time in 2016, I mean, his approval rating was, in the 40s, like 46, I think was maybe the highest that it ever really got. If you look at Real Clear Politics average right now of the 3 approval rating polls that have been done by major pollsters, he's plus 12. So I mean, they're doing a good job of, trying to take advantage of that, especially with this rhetoric, like you said, Collin, on the golden age of America. So yeah. Hopefully we have a long runway on this honeymoon period and can get a lot of stuff done and, promises that were made get kept.
Well, and honestly, I mean, you do see the media struggling a little bit with this in the left. Like, all they want to talk about is Elon Musk and did he Nazi salute or not, and TikTok, which, I mean, as much as I think it's crazy, I'll be clear, I think it's a little crazy that conservatives hated TikTok because China and now Trump's in, so now we love TikTok suddenly. I think we could be, maybe a little bit more intellectually honest with where we stand on things. But that said, Trump did win that situation. I mean, every TikTok user saw a message that said, thanks to President Trump, you now have access to TikTok again. It was good politics, regardless of how you feel about the policy. So, I mean, there's been some political wins for Trump in just the early few days here. There's been some dings. I think January 6th, that situation could have been handled better. But certainly overall, there's been some good political wins for Trump in the first handful of days.
And it's not just the first handful of days we have to look for here. I mean, it's really going to be a matter of these next, 5 to 6 months that's really going to determine. It's going to start determining how 2026 is going to go for the Republican Party. Obviously, I'm thinking very much ahead here. But one of the repercussions of the Democrats deciding to move petitions up a month as part of their omnibus election bill last year is that they have to start getting their candidates ready a month earlier, and with that. Getting candidates is reflective of enthusiasm. And if Democrat enthusiasm is low in the mid to late summer, and the Trump administration is going well, Republicans still seem to have some good numbers in the polls, you might not get the tier 1 Democratic recruits that you would expect from the Democratic Party if there's a successful first 6 months administration. And one of the things that I think the second Trump term has going for it, it's not beholden to the same people it was in 2016 when Trump took over. When Trump took over in 2016, he had to appease much of the old wing of the Republican Party who had supported him in the general election in that cycle. That didn't have to happen this time around. So Trump's able to put his own people in there with different policies, a different vision for the Republican Party, and you're not seeing these, old establishment types as much in the new Trump administration. So that's, I think, a good thing. And if the Trump administration can get, off to a good start over these next 6 months, even if things get a little bit wonky in 2026, it still might not be as bad for us in 2 years, and some people think it might be.
Yeah, that's a conversation we need to have. I wanted to insert it in this week's agenda, but it was already too packed. So we'll get to that in future weeks. But Susan, I wanted to go over to you on this because I know you wanted to talk about the impact here in the local elections, knowing that we've got candidates, conservative candidates throughout the state on the ballot in 2.5 months in the April 1st local elections. What impacts do you or maybe others feel this may all have on those April 1st elections?
Well, sadly, Champaign County did not do very well in the last election. We didn't really even swing red. I'm still waiting for the data. We've got some data coming to kind of look at what we did and what we could have changed. But we fight apathy in Champaign County. That is the biggest issue. I think our voters don't think that their vote counts. So we're going to work really hard to push, the information out to at least the few areas that we have competition from the Democrats. Mostly it's in the townships. We've got Urbana Township and Champaign Township, both have slates of Democrats running, which is actually a new thing. So this is something that they are working to do to try to infiltrate the townships. They've also talked about some of the smaller townships. And so we really have to be on top of it because they are very well organized. They communicate very well. And we need to get on top of the messaging and ride the Trump wave of all of this misinformation and everything coming out. And even like with the J6, like you said, about how it could have been done better. I think over the next 6 months or so, we're going to see the stories of how they were treated, what happened, their rights that were actually violated. And granted, nobody should, go free for, beating up police officers or whatever. But we do have to look at the reality that they did not receive the type of treatment they should have received per our Constitution. And so no matter what someone does, they're still supposed to be innocent until proven guilty, get a speedy trial, and have access to all of the information. And I think that's something important that we as Republicans need to communicate and message that appropriately so that those independents that may only be watching certain news sources actually understand really what happened on J6 and that it wasn't just an insurrection that, President Trump caused. It's not really
listen,
what it was.
I think that the totality of your message is what matters. And I don't think we win on January 6th. So just as a messaging guy, I say we've got bigger issues and we'll talk about them on this podcast. We've got bigger issues that we do win on. And it's certainly better to move the focus on to those issues. We'll talk immigration and we'll talk some of those issues shortly here on the podcast. I think just looking specifically though at local elections, the question is going to be when or if, but typically when that big revolt from the left is going to start. Whenever there's an incumbent presidency, within those first few months, you see some sort of movement come out. The Tea Party was famously, right around, filing deadline at the beginning of April, where that, rose up during the Obama years. And you've got, Code Pink and some of the things that arose on the left during Trump's first term. Like, what is that going to be and when does it happen? Because April 1st is coming soon. If you see that movement happen prior to April 1st, that's going to hurt some of those conservative or in some townships where partisanship is on the ballot, some of those Republican candidates. If it happens after April 1st, certainly that would be a boon for those candidates that are right of center. So it's certainly something to keep an eye on as we approach April 1st.
Collin, both you and Susan just put the words for me to go forward on this. So, of course, many of you should know that in our township, we had our Republican committeeman slate Democrats on his ballot with him. So intentionally. Now, that's not going to help any of us as Republicans. Our township was never held by any Democrat up until the last 6 years. And now it's all Democrat. It's state rep Democrat, it's Senate Democrat. And now we have the Republican committeeman, state central committeeman, adding Democrats as part of his ballot. Or as part of his slate. Now, to me, that person needs to get out, and because we don't need people like that in our system. We have enough problems on our own. Getting Republicans in. We don't need more people like that. And Delmar is just about Delmar, and it's not about the township or
Everybody wants an in-depth discussion on that. I think it was about a month ago, maybe roughly. We had a whole in-depth discussion on it, and I made my thoughts pretty strong, pretty well known on that one. That I didn't agree with the strategy either, but it's certainly something to think about. I want to keep us more broadly on April 1st and just those municipals. Anyone else have thoughts on that topic before we move to the next one? All right, let's go to the next topic here. We've got a few. Why, if we want a great episode, why go to the stuff that's not controversial? We're just going to go straight to the controversial stuff. Let's talk immigration. Later, we're going to talk abortion. Let's just go all out for the controversial stuff. Why the heck not? So, starting with immigration, what we're seeing, and Terri Bryant, Senator Bryant, is here, which is awesome because she's going to have a perspective on this, is that in Illinois, there's been a number of opinions put out and directives put out that have forbade law enforcement. And now we're learning Department of Corrections employees with working with the federal government, working with ICE. And this is putting people in a real tough spot because, as Terri was saying before we started to record, do they listen to the federal government or do they listen to the state government? I mean, you're in a trick box there. Terri, what are you seeing on this?
Well, I put up a pretty serious post last night on my social media sites, basically telling those employees at the Department of Corrections that if they felt like they were in a trick box, it's not the exact words I used, but similar, that they could call my office, make the report to me if they want to, and then I'll be happy to make that report for them to ICE or wherever. Under the Trust Act, which, by the way, I filed a repeal of the Trust Act last year, and I'll be refiling that bill to repeal the Trust Act. We shouldn't be complaining about what laws are in place if we're not ready to step up and repeal them. So I filed, I think there'll be other legislators that file them. But basically in the past in Department of Corrections, when someone who was a non-citizen you're convicted, you're sentenced to a crime, you're delivered to a correctional facility. At that point, you are now a felon, which means that that is a deportable offense. So you can be deported because you are a felon. You're not allowed to be a felon and stay in the
supposedly J.B. Pritzker agrees that
well,
shouldn't be.
And I today I'm saying that both he and Senator Durbin are talking out of both sides of their mouths, because while they're saying that when they're interviewed, the Department of Corrections yesterday put out a memo, 2 pages. I posted it on that social media post that reiterates to state employees in the Department of Corrections what the Trust Act says. So it was issued in 2021. They reissued this. So they're just telling them, hey, we're giving you this insight again. And under the Trust Act, they're not allowed to cooperate with ICE. They're not allowed to tell ICE that anyone is there. There is an ICE detainer that used to be honored in corrections. So if ICE knew that you were going to have someone locked up that they wanted to look at to see if they needed to be deported or have a deportation hearing or whatever, there would be a detainer. So then when that person was ready to be paroled or they're maxing out, they're getting out on the street, either way, they're getting out on the street, then DOC would notify ICE, hey, do you want this guy or not? At that point, then they would go and get a warrant for them, or they would come and talk to them. Under the Trust Act, they're not allowed to, not only are they not allowed to communicate, but they're not allowed to put that detainer notice in the inmate's master file. So unless there's an ICE agent in every courtroom in the United States right now, they're not going to know if that person is there. And then let's face it, in circuit courts, they're also not listing whether that person is a citizen or not. And then on top of that, in lame duck, we passed a law that says they can change their name. And then at that point, you don't really know anything about that person under their old name because you can't know what their old name was. So if I know if you're Collin Corbett, but then you become Collin Smith, if I know you used to be Collin Corbett and I want to look up your criminal history, I can do that because I know you were Collin Corbett. But if I don't know that and you're Collin Smith, everything before that is sealed. I can't go back and look at it. So at this point, state employees are stuck between a rock and a hard place in DOC. They either have to violate federal law and not report it, or they have to violate state law and report it. So I just was notified that the ACLU is very unhappy with me, that they think I'm trying to get people to go around the Trust Act. Well, I don't know if that's what I'm asking people to do. I just want them to know that they don't have to feel like they're stuck between that rock and a hard place. They have legislators, they have representatives who speak for them and will speak for them. So I'm going to do that.
Yeah, listen, I mean, Democrats love loopholes when it benefits them. So,
Right.
suddenly here's one that doesn't benefit them. But I'm glad you highlighted the hypocrisy of Pritzker and Durbin as well, but especially Pritzker, claiming that supposedly he supports, if someone, he said it in multiple interviews that if there's someone who is not here legally, who commits a crime, they should go. And then yet that's actually not happening in the state. But of course, the media doesn't ever follow up on that. They don't question him on it. They don't challenge him on it. We saw the Laken Riley Act pass federally, and you saw Budzinski and Sorensen vote yes on that. Meanwhile, the rest of the Democrats in Illinois voted no on that. Supposedly, if you believe this, then you should support that kind of a law. That if you're committing crimes, I think we can all agree, and I'll share some poll results shortly. We can all agree that if you're committing crimes and you're not here legally, you've lost that right to be here, regardless of how you feel about immigration versus illegal immigration.
Well, we've all seen the news reports and the articles from across the state where, people that are not that are here illegally, not citizens of this country, have committed serious crimes and been, locked up in state facilities. Everything from, DUIs where the accident resulted in a death, robbery, assault, murder, you name it. And here Pritzker is trying to stand in between the criminal and the justice system. And, they're going to serve their time. And in a lot of cases, they're going to be released right back onto the street where, subsequent crimes could be prevented. If
And Michael,
ICE was notified.
Say what those crimes are. You made a great post about the 460 arrests that have already been made in the first days of this enforcement. And I'm looking at it now. I don't want to steal your thunder. I mean, these crimes that these arrests are for are pretty heinous.
Oh yeah. Well, I don't have it. You can steal my thunder if you want, because I don't have the quote.
All right, that's fine. Look at this list here: sexual assault, domestic violence, drugs and weapons crimes. I mean, and this is all across the country, including in Illinois and other states. I mean, I think we could all agree that if you're here illegally and you commit sexual assault or domestic violence, it's time to go.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the amazing things, I was watching the Fox News report today because they were riding along with ICE in Boston as they were making some of these arrests. And the amazing thing to me is we knew where these people were for 4 years or however long that these people have been arrested or whatever. And we're just getting around to them now because the Biden administration or the former administration, if you want to call it that, they just couldn't get around. They couldn't get around. They never wanted to arrest these people. So, I think that's genuinely amazing. These people were just hiding in plain sight, and then all it took for people to look for them to actually go get them.
Yeah, let me share some poll results that you guys might want to react to. So, no different. You could probably all agree that the New York Times is not a conservative publication, and yet the New York Times did an Ipsos poll that they released that found the support for deporting immigrants who are here illegally and have criminal records in this country 87% to 10%. Support for deporting immigrants who are here illegally and arrived over the last 4 years, 63% to 30% supported. Supporting all immigrants who are here illegally, 55% to 42%. Again, this is the New York Times reporting this. Now, there are some pitfalls here I want to share for conservatives and for Republicans. That same poll also found that 56% believe that legal immigrants strengthen the country. So you're not on solid ground with the electorate to be against immigration in total. They also found that ending birthright citizenship for children born to immigrants who are here illegally was not supported. Only 41% supported it, 55% opposed doing that. And then the last thing, opposing ending protection from deportation for those same children, only 34% supported that, 62% opposed. So where we are on solid ground with the electorate is especially criminal records, but even any of those immigrants who are here illegally, the public strongly supports that. Where they don't support us as much is on the birthright citizenship stuff, so we should be pretty careful on those grounds, especially in a state like Illinois. But you talk about those who have criminal records who are here illegally, 87% of the people in this country think they need to go, only 10% disagree. This is solid ground for us to push real hard with the public.
Well, and I don't think it's just in the country. I think it's Illinois too. I mean, that's the reason why Trump got more votes than Pritzker did in his last election. I mean, people are tired of it, even though he didn't win Illinois. To me, it was a win. It's, Illinoisans were telling them, listen, We're tired of, our state money going to the migrants instead of to our disabled. We're tired of all the services, everything, the crime, everything is just focused on the migrants just the last 2 years, especially with Pritzker. And we all know it's for census reasons. But, when I come out and I tell people that, I'm like, well, this is about the census. They're like, oh, I never even thought of that. And that's something I don't think that we get out enough, and because once you start telling people that that's the reason, then they get it. Then they understand it's a numbers thing. It's like, do the math. They totally get that side. But I'm not surprised. But, and then when you go and try and, ship out kids, now you're not going to get as much support.
Yeah.
With adults, get them out.
But the reality,
go ahead.
The birthright citizenship, though, has to be answered because the founders did not intend on someone coming across the border and giving birth. And the health care cost associated with managing all of that, and then we end up having entire families that come over based on that one child that's born, and that is not what the founders intended. So I think it's important that this question gets answered. Yeah. And there have been many different ways it's been interpreted, but when you think about it realistically, it was really started for slaves, that their kids were not considered citizens. It was started to prevent their children from not having all of the rights of citizenship. And so then it's just morphed into this. We have people from China, people from Mexico coming literally across the border, right in El Paso, right in Los Angeles, San Diego, to have babies. We have entire industries built around pregnancy and coming here just to have the baby. And that puts an incredible strain on the healthcare system and the school system. Every system gets strained. Well, listen, so we have to consider that.
It's absolutely being taken advantage of. You're not wrong. I think this is one of those situations where I hope people don't take it too far, because you could say, okay, birthright citizenship for everyone or birthright citizenship for no one. And the answer is in between those two things. Our politicians tend to only live in the extremes. And this is one of those situations where they're going to have to do a little work maybe and find the right sweet spot. Because you're right, people are absolutely taking advantage of it. But the flip side of ending it for everyone is also not palatable. So it's, where do you find that good policy situation where we're not just swinging between extremes?
Somebody's here legally, Collin. I don't have a problem if their kid's born here and then they get citizenship. It's my problem comes in as if they're here illegally.
Yeah. Michael, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, I think that Pritzker is making a mistake here by drawing this hard line in the sand, and trying to protect people that are not only here illegally, but also have committed crimes. And if he's going to prevent ICE from, doing what they need to do to keep our communities safe, then at the end of the day, he's responsible when these individuals reoffend. Because a lot of times whenever they're convicted, they serve their time, they're not deported. We've seen examples of people that were deported during the Trump administration that came back a second time illegally during the Biden administration, and they were not deported because that was, the Biden administration's policy. And people were murdered as a result. It's a serious problem. So we need to be, as Republicans, we need to be calling attention to that and making sure that people are aware of the consequences of Pritzker's actions.
Yeah. Let me move us along here to the next topic. Before I do that, I simply want to say hat tip to John Gioccaris. He had flagged that New York Times poll. I hadn't seen it, so thanks to John for posting that. It gave me something to bring up during this topic. Sharon mentioned earlier about these the money that we are spending on non-citizens. Pritzker, yet again, being the hypocrite, or let's just say liar that he is, earlier this week tried to make a point, tried to claim that those non-citizens who are here don't actually receive government services, that they pay all this money in taxes and they get absolutely nothing for it. Kudos to the Senate Republicans for putting out a fact check on that, because we know that Illinois spends $1 billion annually on non-citizens, and they get things like free health care, legal services, employment assistance, welcoming centers, emergency housing, childcare assistance, education support. They get all sorts of services that, frankly, they don't pay towards in order to get. money that's not going to the tax-paying citizens of this state. So Pritzker gets a giant pants on fire for that lie, which of course, again, the media just let fly without ever challenging. Senator Bryant, I guess I got to start with you on this as well, since this meme originated from the Senate Republicans. So your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, it was really whoever passed him the note to tell him to say that or put it in his speech or whatever, they should be fired, because very, very clearly we have 800, it's almost $900 million that's baked into this year's fiscal year budget that's for illegal immigrants alone. That, is 300 and some odd million, I think it's 300 some odd million just in welcome centers. So I've been beating the drum about welcome centers for a long time. It really goes all the way back to when we were getting COVID money. When I came into the legislature in 2014, 2015, we were giving $35,000 a year, $35,000 a year to welcome centers. Right after that, we went up to about 50,000. Then it went to 90 some odd thousand, then 100 and some odd thousand. We're well over the hundreds of thousands of dollars now. And some of that money is actually stripped from DHS. So where you have Medicaid money that should be going to citizens, that is being taken away from it. And I hate to play a Democrat game here where they pick out things that are, pull on your heartstrings. But the fact is, we're underfunding our DD community while we're giving extra money in these cases to illegal immigrants. And that money is actually being diverted from DHS to illegal immigrants. And so why he would say that, I don't know. I guess he knows that people generally are not fact checking him. So to your point about what Republicans have to do and some of the things that we have to stand on, that we have a real leg to stand on and real power behind us, would be included in this issue of what money gets spent on non-citizens. And if I could go back 1 second on this immigration issue, it is that my closest friend in the world is Nicaraguan. Had to spend 7 years in Mexico trying to get to the United States, came as a legitimate asylee in the 1980s. And she, along with every other legal immigrant that I know, do not want those who came barreling, busting down the back door to get into the United States when they came in through the front door. So that's what they say. Welcome if you come in through the front door. You are not allowed to break through the back door and come into my home and steal that we've worked so hard for, the same way you would come into my house. You're coming into my home, the United States, and stealing things that were meant for my family.
Well, you know what? This being the smoke-filled room, I simply have to plug Nicaraguan cigars. I mean, my father has some excellent cigars that are among my favorites. So who else has thoughts on the topic here? Sharon, I know you've been dying to jump in here.
No, it just, one of the things that, I've always been a huge supporter of our disabled. And I've taught them swimming. I've done, the Olympics. I mean, it's just something that I've always had a passion about. And, to see that Governor Pritzker decided to give the migrants $400 million last year in the budget, and he gave a tenth of that to our developmentally disabled, a tenth. And I mean,
and aren't we one of the worst states in the country in our funding?
Yes. Yeah. And like even seniors, we finally, when I worked for nursing homes, and we're talking 40 years ago, we gave our seniors, like if you were on Medicaid, we gave our seniors $25. Just last year, they changed it, and $25 a month is all you get to buy your underwear, toothpaste, comb, shoes. That's it. Haircuts. Last year, we changed it finally from $30 to $60. And why? Because we don't have the money. And now we're in this, $3.4 billion deficit? What happened to all the marijuana money? It's his discompassion of our developmentally disabled. And the fact is, the man's never had to have a budget in his life. He doesn't know how to run anything with a budget because he's never had to. And if you struggle, then you know how to run a budget. People who struggle, those families who struggle, we know how what it's like. That guy has no clue. he should not, I always said nobody should be in office if they make more than 500,000 a year, unless they started from nothing.
Okay. Well, and you know what? Whenever the bright lights are on, your mind tends to go blank. I forgot Oliva cigars are from Nicaragua. Essencia cigars. I'm sorry, I'm still on cigars. My wife knows because it's been so dry out. We've got a humidifier in Teddy's room just to keep him from getting too dry, and I keep calling it humidor because I'm so desperate for a cigar because I can't have any. So that's just all I've got in the brain, guys. If you want me to be focused on policy, good luck with that. All right, let's go through. Go ahead, Chris. Close us out on this topic.
Yeah, I was going to close this out because I recall, 2 years ago, there was a whole argument in the budget about whether or not illegal immigrants have health care in the state of Illinois. And the argument basically came down to Don Harmon said, no, we can't afford that. J.B. Pritzker said, of course, yeah, we can afford that. Money doesn't exist. And then Chris Welch was just kind of standing in the corner, like not doing anything, just kind of doing nothing. It was weird. And then Harmon won for 5 minutes. And then 6 months later, oh, actually, we're doing this now. And nobody kind of objected to it anymore. It was weird. Nobody talked about it at the time how we just had free health care for undocumented immigrants, but it just kind of happened. So
the Republicans said something, but we don't really matter.
It was wonderful sitting in the hospital talking about our bills that we'd be paying for the birth of our son while the undocumented family was sitting next to us talking about all the free stuff they were going to get. It was great hearing that while I was swiping my credit card. Anyways, let's continue moving along here. From one controversial topic to another, let's talk abortion. Michael and Chris are frequently putting abortion-related topics into their suggestions. I don't often take them, but you know what? We got some big abortion news, so we got to talk about it. We have a couple things here. Number one, let's quickly talk about this because we've covered it a few times already, which is that national Republicans are finally playing the game and they are making Democrats take tough votes, which is trickling down to all the rest of these states. In the last week, they made Democrats vote on the Born Alive abortion bill. So if you don't know what this is, it's covering the fact that if a baby is born alive after an attempted abortion, what do you do with that baby? It's there, it's alive. What do you do with it? It's super rare. Democrats point out how rare it is. Between 2003 and 2014, which is a long time ago, but whatever, it's the only stats I could find. This only happened 143 times. However, it did happen 143 times. And so Republicans made Democrats go on the record on this. Of course, every Democrat voted against it. It became a big thing. And regardless of where you stand on abortion itself, no Democrat could say that they oppose this policy, that if a baby's born alive, you should keep it alive. They were just saying, oh no, this is a tax on women's health care. This is fear mongering, blah, blah, blah. But I think the key point here is, again, Republicans forcing, like they did with the Lincoln Riley Act, like they've done already a few times, force Democrats to put votes on this. Democrats were doing this to us on IVF and all sorts of other bills in the lead up to the last election. Well, turnabout is fair play. We're playing the game, and I'm really happy to finally see Republicans get on the playing field. So we're going to shift to the Illinois focus, specifically Planned Parenthood, in a second. But does anybody have any burning thoughts on this Born Alive bill before we do that?
So this isn't the first time this bill has come up. I recall it coming up in several previous Congresses. But the interesting thing is that there used to be some Democrats that would vote for this. And ironically, all of them have either retired, that's Manchin, or have been taken out by Republicans.
Or by Democrats.
So now there is literally not a single Democrat in the Senate Democratic caucus who are willing to vote for this bill, which I was expecting maybe some would come around because, the pendulum's shifting in America. Maybe we could get some people on our side on this issue. But it's abundantly clear that the Democratic Party is officially 100% behind the pro-abortion side of the issue. So even a bill like this, you can't even get to the vote for it.
Well, I think that they've seen what happens whenever they do, like Lipinski and some of these others that would put votes up on bills like this and had a little bit of common sense. They were just run out of the Democratic Party. Sometimes it took the Democrats multiple attempts, like in the case of Lipinski, it took them 2 tries to get it done, but they did it. And it's one of those issues where if you're a Democrat and you step out of line, the abortion lobby, they're going to come after you relentlessly, and they have the money to do it. So,
yeah. Well, let's shift to the Illinois focus on this issue. And then if you guys have more thoughts on the topic, feel free. But the Illinois focus of this is straightforward. We just heard in this last week that Planned Parenthood is going to be closing 4 clinics in Illinois due to a financial shortfall. And For some clarity on this, these are 4 clinics that do not perform abortions, so they made sure to keep those open, FYI. The thing that really stands out to me is I said this, I think, about a month or two ago. I kind of warned people that Planned Parenthood was talking about how they were facing budgetary shortfalls because of the fact that they're having to spend so much money on out-of-state residents when it comes to performing abortions. And here we are. They're sort of hinting at that in their press release, that part of the challenge here is that fact that they're performing so many abortions for out-of-state residents. And, for me, regardless of where you stand on abortion itself, shouldn't we say that if you believe in abortion, as an Illinois taxpayer, you want that to be focused on Illinois residents, that your tax dollars and the focus of Planned Parenthood Illinois should be focused on the Illinois needs, maybe not so much the other 49 states. Do Illinois first, and then if you have some leftover money, focus on the other states. But here we've got Planned Parenthood closing 4 clinics. These are women's health clinics that don't perform abortions that are being closed because they want to prioritize the abortions on the border that do provide those abortions. This is the frustrating thing here. You can look at this from different angles. For me, it isn't really pro-life versus pro-choice. It's pro-Illinois, that tax dollars are going towards Planned Parenthood in this state, and yet they're focusing these tax dollars on the residents of the other 49 states and Pritzker and sort of that pro-abortion agenda, instead of let's take care of our residents first. We see this on immigration, and now we see it on abortion.
Collin,
I would like to point out, Collin, that I understand the argument you're trying to make. I just think it misunderstands why the pro-abortion side believes what it does and how serious it believes what it does. Because
I don't misunderstand that at all, Chris.
Right, but for them, it has nothing to do with like Illinois #1. They get their abortion.
But it should be.
No.
And I think Illinois residents would agree with that regardless of whether they're pro-choice or pro-life, I think you could go to a pro-choice doorstep and say your tax dollars are going to pay for abortions for other states. And by the way, Illinois residents, we just lost 4 clinics because they couldn't afford to keep it open. I think you could go to suburban pro-choice doorsteps and say that and get some support. And that's my point here, is trying to equip our audience with messages that work with swing voters. And I think if you get lost on the pro-life versus pro-choice, everyone already knows how they feel about that. But I think here, just like with immigration, you've got some pretty solid ground here on this portion of this topic.
I agree with Chris. I think if you are pro-abortion, you will support flying people all over the country to get their abortions. I think those people are so radical and so out of touch with life that they will do that. And so I'm with Chris on this. I really do think that they are so radical that it does not matter to them that it's Illinois taxpayer dollars, just like it doesn't matter in the service, in the military. They want to fly people and have people move out of, their wherever they've been stationed and be able to go to another place because they believe in abortion. We're doing that from a federal standpoint where we were. Thank God we're not now, I don't think. But, so really these people are that radical. They don't care about taxpayer dollars.
I think they're based, I'm with you on their base. I mean, Personal PAC's quote on this, their CEO, Sarah Garza-Resnick, said her response on this had nothing to do with Illinois. It was, Illinois remains a critical access point for reproductive care and family planning for people from all across the country. That was her focus here. So I think you're right that their base, this is all they care about. I'm talking about average families, those suburban families in Naperville and Palatine and these suburban areas. They're not the members of Personal PAC. They're not the Pat Brady's, as you'd like to say, Chris, of the world. They're not. That's just not their agenda. I know you guys like to think that the other side is just all crazies and extremes, but as the messaging and polling expert here, I'm telling you that your average swing voter, they don't think the way that crazy that you think they do.
Collin, we need to
hold on, Chris. Hold on. Sharon's been trying to get in. Go ahead, Sharon.
Sorry, I was going to say, Collin, anybody I've spoken to that is in the middle of that subject, or even totally pro-choice. I don't know anybody that thinks taxpayer dollars should go to abortions. Every single one of them says, oh, well, I don't think we should be, tax dollars should go there. They assume that they're fundraising to get those paid for. They don't, even today, people do not realize tax dollars, our tax dollars, are going to abortions. And when you tell them, they're like, oh, no, that can't be true. Yeah.
I think one of the things that we can stand on, Collin, is one of those, when you're talking about picking things that can be Republican issues that we can stand on, is number one, people don't realize that there is no Medicaid reimbursement for abortions, right? So since Illinois allows, you don't have to be a citizen, you don't have of the United States, you don't have to be a citizen of Illinois. It's 100% taxpayer funded by Illinoisans. Now, whether they believe in taxpayer funding or not, they don't think it's okay to bring someone in from out of state or to bring someone in from another country to be reimbursed for that. And I'm going to take a different angle here for a second, because I feel like there's something nefarious going on as well. We're just now starting to have conversations about what the FY26 budget will look like. Is that right? Yeah, FY26 budget will look like. And now all of a sudden Planned Parenthood is coming forward and saying they're lacking money. Don't you think that a portion of this is just because they want to make sure that in the 26 budget, they get not only what they're already getting, but they get additional money? Because that's what I think is happening right now. They're creating a crisis so they can get that extra money that they're going to want in 2, 3, 4 months from now.
Yeah.
Well, when Pritzker's made it very clear multiple times that he wants Illinois to be a destination for abortions, that people need to be coming from other states where the laws are more strict. Come to Illinois, get your abortion here. And I think that, it seems like Planned Parenthood in Illinois has kind of overextended themselves. They were there for a while. They were opening up new clinics and new locations all over the state. And now here we are, they're closing 4 of them down. So I think,
Michael,
I agree
just to emphasize this point, here's the stats. Just that they put this out in their own press release that before the Dobbs decision, 3 to 5% of the abortions that they perform were for out-of-state residents. It's now 25%. So it's a quarter of the abortions that they perform are for out-of-state residents. So it has definitely been a significant increase.
So yeah, you may have some people, average voters that lean pro-choice that may, have a problem with this and think that it's an issue. But at a high level, your Juliana Strattons and your Pritzkers and your Chris Welches of the world, they have no problem with people getting flown in from all over the country and getting an abortion here, because that's how strongly they believe in abortions. That they see it as they're doing they go to bed at night with a smile on their face because somebody from Texas flew to Illinois and they got an abortion here, and they're proud of that.
Right, and that was what my overall point here was on this topic, because I disagreed with the characterization that Planned Parenthood should care about Illinois abortions first before national abortions. This is not who Planned Parenthood is. It's not what Pat Brady PAC is. That's not what any of these organizations are. They have an overarching agenda that's in favor of abortion. And I think I agree to some extent that the average John Q, pro-choice out there isn't going to want to support, taxpayer funding for out-of-state abortions. At the same time, is that really the key issue we're going to be bringing up at the doors here? Is that really what's going to move the abortion pendulum back towards our direction? I think it requires a lot more than that. And I think that, I think the Illinois abortion nationalism that seems to be where Collin's coming from here, I think that's a little weird. And I don't know I think we need to structure this a little bit better.
Yeah, I'll close with this simply. With taxpayer dollars going towards Planned Parenthood, I'd also like to know why the shortfall. I mean, there's very little detail. And the Tribune tried to get more detail. They said Planned Parenthood would not answer their questions about what led to the shortfall or give any details on what's in their statement. I mean, if taxpayer dollars are going towards this organization, I feel like we should have some clarity. But anytime politicians try to get some clarity or maybe put in some requirements for, you have to actually make sure these are up to code, people freak out like, you can't touch that. But you know what? I think, requiring some level of disclosure here, if especially as Terry said, if they're going to be coming for more money, let's find out what led to that shortfall. I think that's a realistic request, and they wouldn't even answer the Tribune's questions. I'm sure they're not going to answer, Terri Bryant's or any Republican down in Springfield's questions, but the questions certainly need to be asked, and I'm sure they will be. All right,
it might be a projected shortfall. That's what I think it is.
let's get to the next thing here. So off of those super controversial topics, let's talk about Stellantis. So Stellantis put out a statement that they'd be reopening the factory in Belvidere, Illinois. They'd also be increasing production around the rest of the country. And they specifically stated that it was after meeting with Trump and his administration that they were making these moves. Immediately after that came out, J.B. Pritzker freaked out, of course, because he wants the credit. And so he put out a statement immediately after that saying, this is great work that we did. It's thanks to the state of Illinois, the Biden-Harris administration, UAW, Senator Durbin, Senator Duckworth, Bill Foster, Eric Sorensen, purposely mentioning everybody but any of the Republicans who were involved in this. Basically like a petulant child going, it's our work, even though they had months to do something about this. I even called them out several times on this podcast. Where were you, Governor Pritzker? When the promise was made, they did all these press releases and they got big press hits on, it's all good. Belvidere's going to reopen. Then it didn't. And there was crickets and they did nothing. And here Trump comes back a couple days later, it's out. And suddenly now Pritzker and the Democrats want to take responsibility for it and take credit for it. Kudos to Darren LaHood, put out a great statement about this, about the announcement, how it would bring 1,500 jobs back to Northwest Illinois. These are high-paying jobs. They help the economy. They bolster U.S. manufacturing. White House also put out a statement and, of course, mentioned welcome to the golden age. But I thought there's two parts of this. Thank God we're going to bring these jobs back to Belvidere. That community desperately needs this. They deserve these high-paying jobs, so I'm really happy to see some movement here. And I just got to laugh at the petulant child that is J.B. Pritzker going, no, I did it. It was me and Biden. I don't know what you guys think about this, but that's my thoughts. Now, is it you're gonna let my horrible impression of Pritzker be the final word on this topic?
I read something today. I wish I would have bookmarked it or something, but where Pritzker was about to lose his mind because Stellantis was giving credit to Trump. So yeah. I think that might have been what set Pritzker off was Stellantis is giving credit to Trump, but I don't think it can be lost in all of these messages that who would want to expand or do what Stellantis is going to do if Biden would have won? It would have been business as usual the next 4 years as it was for the last 4 years. So in this case, Trump deserves the credit for it, and JB needs to suck it up.
Yeah. He lost. What do they like to tell Republicans all the time in Springfield? Elections have consequences. You lost. Shut up. Well, guess what, guys? You lost. Shut up. I mean, hey, turnabout's fair play. You want to tell us that constantly? We get to tell you that then. Mm-hmm. All right, moving along. We got to talk pensions, and I got to give kudos to Patrick Finkston. He is still working despite the recent birth of his second child and not getting any sleep. But he did something cool with the Illinoisans this week. I thought it was awesome. He had somebody from IPI, Amy Cordy, put in a thought on pensions from the conservative side, and then he had somebody from the left put in their thoughts on what they thought should be done with pensions in the state. Someone, Pat Devaney from the Illinois AFL-CIO. I thought it was a pretty cool thing, and it kind of gave both sides of this. But for those who may not be aware, pensions are going to be a big topic, if not the biggest topic, in Springfield in 2025. They want to fix to Tier 2 pensions. They're saying that Tier 2 pensions need to fix. I've heard a lot of people right of center say that there is a need to make a change, make a fix, because there is a portion of this that needs to be adjusted and improved. However, of course, this is being looked at by the left as a Christmas tree of let's now lower the retirement age, add more benefits, add this, add that, add this. And it came out this week that the bill that they were pushing would increase taxpayer costs for pensions another $30 billion, billion with a B, over the next 20 years. Even it was, again, I'll give kudos where they're due, it was Rich Miller of Cat Facts who said that pension costs would soar. Obviously, he was using this language from the Commission of Government Forecasting and Accountability, COFCA, but he used that word soar, and it's true. The bill that they want would increase costs for taxpayers $30 billion with a B, and usually those projections are low. Usually it's more than what they say. So that fix is not going to work. It's not affordable for taxpayers. The question is, where are they going to settle here? Again, I don't mean to keep making you go first, Terry, but obviously you're focused on this from a number of perspectives, so I want to pass it to you to kick us off.
Yeah, it's okay. During veto session, actually, the bill that I think that they costed out was a bill that was supposed to be the conversation starting point. And a whole bunch of Democrats went on as sponsors. So during veto in the Senate, the Democrat leadership was actually going around to their members and pulling them off the bill because they didn't want them on it. The more people that you get on it as it is, the less leverage you have when you're negotiating. So that being said, there does need to be a change. I was working still in corrections when Tier 2 went into effect. And I remember then, as a very conservative Republican, much more conservative then than I think I probably am now fiscally, I told them this isn't going to work. You can't have, just using Department of Corrections, you can't have people working side by side with each other. One of them bragging about the fact that I can retire at 55 and you got to work till you're 67. First of all, teachers and corrections employees and DHS workers at places like Chester Mental Health, they can't work till they're 67. They just can't, physically, you cannot do it. That's number one. I don't think the fix is the bill that was filed. I think the fix is going back to something very similar to what Tier 1 was in the first place without the compounded COLA. If you take the compounded COLA out and maybe you make it 60 instead of 67 or instead of 55, there's wiggle room there for that. It was the compounded COLA that really started to kill us. And I was also working in corrections when the compounded COLA was added in. As somebody who was in Tier 1, I was thrilled about it. But I remember standing there and thinking, I was licensed for securities at one time in 3 different states. I remember looking at that and thinking, I love compounded COLAs whenever they're working to my advantage. I hate compounded COLAs when I'm the one having to pay it. So you can take money out of your left pocket to put in your right pocket if you're a state employee. In this case, I have a different hat on, but I think there's plenty of room here to make this right. Call it Tier 3, call it the Tier 2 fix, call it whatever, but Tier 2 cannot stay as it is, whether it's the safe harbor issues or just simply because you cannot make people work until they're beyond their life expectancy. Right now, they actually have to work more than 10 years longer than what their life expectancy is if you're in the Department of Corrections. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I know the conservative position, IPI, is saying adjust the pay cap, which deals with that safe harbor issue. And then if, as you said, Senator Bryant, if there's other things we need to look at, let's do that. But do it through the lens of the fact that, we're still struggling to get out of this pension hole that we're in the state. We still have the worst funded pension system in the country. We still have this eating up a gigantic portion of our budget. We all agree we need to take care of our public employees, our teachers, our police officers, our firefighters, et cetera. Certainly understand that and support that, but we also need to be able to afford it. And this is crowding on other expenditures. So if you want to add even more onto that, then okay, then what do you want to cut? I mean, Democrats, if you want to add more onto this, even Republicans, okay, I get it. Then where are you going to cut? Because this money has to come from somewhere. There isn't free dollars. Even
they don't want to cut. They don't want to cut. They want a tax increase, and they're looking at what is they think is a honeypot, and that's retirees' income. So taxing retirees' income, which is the only demographic that we still have staying in the state. Everybody else is trying to get out. Retirees often want to stay here at least 6 months plus 1 day so that they get to not have their retirement income taxed. So I think that, we have to keep looking at that. And conservatives don't like to look at reamortization. I really don't like it very much. But if there was a means to look at it where whatever was saved by reamortization had to go only back into pensions, that is at least something to look at. Whether we do it or not is, still to be said.
A lot of people don't understand too that there are certain professions that did not pay into Social Security. So that's all they have is their pension. So teachers are one, most police departments, most fire departments. But, you take like Palatine, for example, where my ex-husband worked, he paid into both. So 48% of his check went into taxes, taxes, pension, whatever. So his income was significantly less back then, but he started out in, I think it was 87, making $15,000 a year to be a police officer. Now the incomes are much higher, but, not everybody gets that COLA either. There's people that, if you're on, in full disclosure, someone like me, I'm on disability through the police department from multiple injuries, but anybody that's been injured, and I'm going to use like the policeman from Bensonville that was shot 10 times. He's never coming back. His disability will never increase until he's 60 years old. And then he does not get that COLA. He only gets 3% on what he left at. And that's his only increase every year. So it's significantly less. You look at Tim Mullins, who was shot in the back. He's been in a wheelchair for 30 years practically. And he just got an increase 2 years ago. He has $1 million in medical bills every year, at least $1 million, because he's on a respirator. I mean, it just, there's a difference there. Having a cap, I think, is the only way to do it, because some of these teachers that retired, they're making close to $200,000 a year right now because they're getting that increase every year. And that compounding. If it were simple interest, it might be a little bit better, but I still think there needs to be a cap.
Well, and I think there's that conversation, right? That people are saying, oh, they're not getting enough. Listen, there's a lot of stats I'm sure we're going to see over the next few months, but the current cap that we're looking at is $83,000 to start per year. The average, the
I'd be happy with that.
The maximum for Social Security is 48,000. So, I mean, when we say that that's not enough, we're looking at people living on Social Security on 48 grand a year to start. Meanwhile, the cap from pensions is 83. And if you just fix that, if you just increase that cap, it moves it up to $111,000 annually. I mean, we're crying poor at 83,000 a year, 111,000 a year. I mean, that's, as Sharon, to your point, when we're looking at that cap, all right, do those teachers, especially early on, when they're getting 30, 40, can you live on that? No. So there is certainly a conversation to be had, but when you look at those people who are getting way more than that, I'm sorry, I can't cry poor for those people who are making hundreds of thousands of dollars off of taxpayers every year and then, complaining that that's not enough for them. I'm sorry. I care more about those police officers, those teachers, those Department of Corrections employees who are putting their lives on the line and are beating their bodies to the bone, and they're looking at 30, 40, 50. Okay, now that, I'm willing to do something about that. But you're a state employee, or you work for one of the state universities, and you're making $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, and you're getting a big chunk of that every year for your pension. I'm not crying crocodile tears for you.
Well, the more south you go in Illinois, you're probably going to get significantly less income in all those positions. So, like Collin, we live in one of the highest paid districts, school districts. So most of that money coming out of that fund is coming from people in our district, that are retiring. People down south that were, wow, they were making 50,000. They were excited to make 50,000 because they bought a house for 50,000. Whereas it's just a differentiation there. One person's getting significantly more than others, even though they put the same time in. I don't know that that's fair either.
Yeah, fair. Let me move us to our next topic. These next couple I want to move through a little bit quickly because there's some juicy ones towards the end I don't want to lose time on. So these next couple we'll do pretty quickly. But I do want to point this out that ProPublica came out with a report talking about how government makes it harder and harder to operate and especially open new child care centers in Illinois. Just at the same time where you see SEIU and some other groups saying they want more and more money from the current budget because the problem is simply we're not paying these employees enough, which may or may not be true. I don't follow the policy that closely. But of course, completely ignoring this report from ProPublica, which actually made some pretty good suggestions and pointed out some pretty clear things that government doesn't do super well to help address this problem, because childcare costs are enormous. I'm starting to learn this as a new parent. And then there are deserts in the state where people can't even get the childcare that they need. So this is certainly a challenge we have to address in the state. And there are some problems ProPublica identified, which I think is awesome, where they point to the fact that state efforts aren't helping. Rebuild Illinois was a $45 billion multi-year capital improvement plan that was passed. And yet, despite the fact that $100 million was allocated for these facilities, only 8 out of the 238 applicants actually got any money from these grants. And they were all in the Chicago and suburban areas. None in the southern half of the state got any funding. That's clearly contributing to the problem here. They talk about the licensing delays. I know we've heard Springfield talk about the licensing problems for the last couple years now, that there are licensing problems in Illinois, and that's leading and increasing these staffing shortages that we see in the state. That the agency is missing its deadlines to approve applications a third of the time. You're seeing, again, I'm just going to give the highlights because I don't want to spend too much time on this. They talk about a lot of these licensing delays causing significant problems for staffing. talking about outdated and contradictory regulations. This blew my mind, some of these. So, for instance, one regulation requires blankets in every crib, even though before my child was born, I was told by 30 different experts, don't you dare put anything in the crib, including blankets. And yet there's a regulation in Illinois that requires blankets in every crib in these childcare centers. Just seems completely ridiculous. Another rule requires that providers carry coins on their walks to use as when they need a payphone in case there's an emergency. I mean, maybe we should actually look at these regulations that we're putting on these childcare providers and these childcare centers, because they're saying these inconsistencies in these rules are creating compliance challenges. That makes a lot of sense. Last thing that they point to is the low reimbursement rates that they get in Illinois. Around the country, that the benchmark is 75%, and yet in Illinois, the state reimburses less than 45%. These are clear things that the state does where they are hurting our child care centers. ProPublica pointed this out, but of course, SEIU, they focus on the employees that they represent. All they care about is let's get them more money. It seems like a lot like the CTU challenges in Chicago, where they just want more money, more money, more money, instead of, hey, maybe let's look at some common sense reforms as well. Don't know if you guys have any thoughts, but I just wanted to put that out there. That look at ProPublica.org. They did some great work on this. It's worth looking at because this is a conversation we're going to be hearing a lot about with childcare in Illinois and nationally in the coming weeks, months, and years.
Well, I was just going to say this is kind of related, but also not. I saw that Rep. Amy Murray-Briel, she was, newly elected. She filed a bill pertaining to rural health care, and she said that she wanted to create a working group to investigate, what the problems are. And I think that's one of the issues that we've got in Springfield right now is you have a lot of these Democrat legislators that want to establish a working group so they can put together, a 100-page PDF of what the problems are, but then nothing actually gets done about it. We've had plenty of working groups. We know what the problems are. Everybody's aware of those issues. Let's actually do something to address the problem instead of putting together a nice little report that can go on a shelf somewhere in Springfield.
Yeah, that was going to be one of my clowns of the weeks, and maybe you too. So I'm sure that will come up later in the.
Rich Miller even trolled her for it.
Yeah, rightfully so.
That's saying something.
All right, one last quick hit here. So for those who may not be aware, the Illinois Policy Institute has been pushing advisory questions in townships on some of their top issues. I think it's an interesting strategy, get some votes on those issues to try to get some press and get some momentum down in Springfield. Interesting strategy. They had contacted a number of our clients in various townships and municipalities throughout the Chicagoland area, but it was all private. So we've known about this for a few months, but we didn't want to break confidentiality for any of our clients or for IPI. But Matt Paprocki put out I think a letter to the editor or op-ed about it. So now we can talk about it. In 9 different townships, they're putting these advisory questions on the ballot. Palatine, Lamont, Homer, Palos, Winfield, Antioch, Leiden, Wheeling, and Addison townships. So a few different counties throughout Chicagoland area. And these advisory questions are on pensions, on fair maps, and on unfunded mandates, how voters think about those things in those townships. And they had a number here. Yeah, 650,000 people will be making their voices heard on those topics on April 1st in the municipal elections. So interesting strategy. Obviously, these are topics that I know they'd like to be more in the news, especially things like pensions and fair maps. So I think it's an interesting strategy. We'll see what happens and how the vote goes on these topics in those 9 townships on April 1st. Curious if anybody has any thoughts on that or if it's just interesting. Let's keep an eye on it.
No, I mean, I think it's a great idea. It puts people on the record and it gives legislators, especially, the state reps and state senators that represent those areas where it's on the ballot. It gives them some leverage and at least at a minimum, a talking point of, hey, my constituents, made their voices heard. This is what they want. And let's try to get this done.
Yeah, I mean, they did this in Barrington Township in 2024 in that election, just the pension reform one, and it passed with 73% of the vote. So that's obviously Barrington Township. Let's see how it does in these others, but it's building on that strategy.
Oh, and I'm not a fan for that exact reason is because when they put those resolutions out or advisory referendums, first of all, people don't understand the difference between advisory and something that is, going to actually be enacted. But there's always a different way to word something.
Yeah.
So they're going to word it to be exactly the way they want it and to look as bad as they want it to look. And
That's politics.
but I understand that's politics, but people, your normal everyday person, I understand that's politics, but your normal everyday person doesn't get it. So I always tell people, you have to read into what it says. That's why I don't like those.
Well, listen,
and
you're right. And the
anyway,
left does it, obviously, with their millionaires tax to go towards pension or to property tax reform, which
right.
we know will never actually happen. But listen, while I will grant everything you just said, this podcast and my focus is politics, and so this is good politics. It may not be good policy, and I respect that, but it's great politics. And you know what? If the left's going to do it, it's about time we get in that arena, as my boy Teddy Roosevelt would say. So I like that they're getting in the arena and giving this a try. We'll see where it goes, but it's an interesting thing worth keeping an eye on.
Now,
All right, we got two juicy topics. Was someone trying to talk?
I was going to make fun of you because of Teddy Roosevelt. We can continue.
Yeah, it's not wise ground to stand on if you like getting a paycheck.
Don't tempt me, Collin.
All right. Last two topics here before we close down our episode are some pretty fun, I think, fun political topics. First one here is this. J.B. Pritzker, it's interesting. They're very intentional about their messaging. Maybe a little less so, now that they've lost most of the talent out of their comm shop. But J.B. Pritzker's always been very intentional. So when he says something, it's very rarely off the cuff. And so when you see him talk about how Trump is, hold on, I want to get it correct. Our Midwestern values are under siege because of Donald Trump. That's not an accidental phrasing, not an accidental thing. J.B. Pritzker's trying to push this, that these are our Midwestern values, but kudos to Michael Butler, who did some work on this and posted. If you look at the results from the election, Donald Trump won the Midwest by 2 million votes. As a matter of fact, the only states that he didn't win in the Midwest were Illinois by 600,000 votes, and then Minnesota barely by 150,000 votes, or at least barely by comparison. So basically what we're seeing here is J.B. Pritzker wants the Midwestern values to be his ultra-progressive values, which we see this if you look at the map. Illinois is that bastion of deep blue progressive values coming out of people like J.B. Pritzker, but you can't claim those are now the Midwestern values when all the other states, except for Minnesota, disagree, and all the other voters, at least by a majority, voted for Trump over your choice for president. It's pretty hard for you to make that claim. I don't think we're going to change Midwestern values from hardworking kitchen table issues, blue collar issues, just because J.B. Pritzker wants them to become those new ultra progressive values where he wants to focus on abortion and illegal immigration and LGBTQ issues. That's what he wants Midwestern values to be. But it seems like J.B. Pritzker is now going to be on a one-man crusade to change what the words or phrase Midwestern values means. And so again, Pritzker is not, he doesn't speak off the cuff. You're going to see this more and more. This is clearly not an accidental phrasing. So let's be on the front end of this and let's talk about it. What do you guys think? You think Midwestern values are J.B. Pritzker's values?
Well, I think obviously he's either a liar or out of touch with reality, because you take the states that are classified as Midwestern, Trump won those with 50, you add all those states together, Trump won with 53% of the vote. So he beat Kamala Harris by 6 points.
Michael, I'd love to see what those numbers are if you cut out Illinois. It's going to be obviously an even bigger gap.
Well, if you cut out Cook County, right? I mean, he's trying to redefine Midwestern values as what people on, Lakeshore Drive think. That is Midwestern values. Well, that's not true. I think that our Midwestern values are being pretty well represented, especially considering Trump won the Midwest by 6 points.
I love when people from Southern Illinois try to talk. It just sounds just as ridiculous as when I try to talk about Southern Illinois. I don't think other than maybe a tiny portion, I don't think anybody actually lives on Lakeshore Drive, though I get your point. Either way, he's trying to say that North Shore values or, that Halstead Street, that is what represents Midwestern values. That's your point. But I do kind of chuckle because, when I try to talk Southern Illinois, when I try to talk farming issues, I sound like a complete idiot.
I'm surprised Butler knows what Lakeshore Drive is. So my thing on this issue is a little bit of a history lesson. So history tells us that 20 years ago, the Midwest was considered so socially conservative that when presidential candidates came to the Midwest, they would instinctively not talk about gay marriage or gay rights because they knew it was a losing issue to talk about LGBTQ issues in the Midwest. Now, obviously, the country has changed. But to say that Midwestern values are and always have been a progressive social agenda tailored around abortion rights and, unfettered immigration and all of these other things. That's just not true. And it's not grounded in history, and it's not grounded in reality. The Midwest is a swing area. You have the quote unquote blue wall that it used to be of Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, which Pennsylvania is not really Midwest, but it kind of is ish. It doesn't matter. But these are all swing moderate states. These aren't far left states. Even the red states in the area, like Iowa and Ohio, these aren't, these are Republican states, but they're not Republican in the same way that like Texas is Republican or Florida is Republican. They're Republican for different reasons. The Midwest is unique in its its personality and its politics. And to say that Midwestern values can be limited to abortion rights, immigrant rights, and all the other things completely takes away the years of history that Midwestern politics has been. So I think it's tone deaf, but it's what he's trying to do is he's trying to build a national narrative, and he's testing things right now to see how they're going to work in Iowa. Is what he's trying.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I mean, he's testing these things out, but I think you're seeing a continuation of the failure of J.B. Pritzker when it comes to his issues and his message. Yes, he can get them passed in Illinois with their supermajority and their, horribly gerrymandered maps and his billions of dollars. But when you try to play that on the national stage, Joe Biden listened to Pritzker on a lot of his messaging, and it didn't play super well, especially not in the Midwest. Kamala Harris and her team listened to J.B. Pritzker with a lot of his messaging, and it didn't play super well in the Midwest. We've covered this over and over on this podcast that a lot of Pritzker's messaging can play in certain pockets, but they don't play throughout the whole Midwest. And we saw that play out in the 2024 election. And so we've said this. When J.B. Pritzker tries to run for president, he's under the impression that he's going to do super well in the Midwest. And other than Minnesota, J.B. Pritzker is likely to get his butt kicked even in a Democratic primary in the Midwest, because even in Democratic primaries in some of these states, they aren't as crazy progressive as Pritzker has been, at least for the last handful of years.
If you want to see really what the Midwest looks like, you would look at the Illinois State Republican Senate, right? So even though when you look at us, it's not diverse, black, white, brown, but it is diverse in that we have members that have little sections of Chicago and go all the way down to Cairo, from the east to the west, all the way around. And I think the values of the Midwest are faith and family, more than anything, but more than that, it's common sense. And even the times that I just heard Donald Trump speak over this last week during the inauguration, he talked about common sense. And I'll tell you, from a Midwesterner's standpoint, my grandpa, who had an 8th grade education, but was a supervisor for what used to be Illinois Power, now Ameren, he used to say, he'd look at a guy and he would say, that fella just educated himself right into stupid. Right? That's Midwest. Midwest is common sense, hardworking. I get to work. It's the first person there. I'm the last one to leave. I work harder than anybody else, especially when my boss is not looking. That's the time I work the hardest. I work for my family and my faith, and then I'm generous to everybody else. That's Midwestern values. And J.B. Pritzker doesn't get it, because he's never had to work in that same way. I like what was said very early on this podcast about him not having to ever run a budget. If he's run a budget, it's been a corporate budget, and it hasn't been the kind of budget that many of us have had to do, where we've had to figure out, do you buy groceries or do you put gas in the car? If you don't put gas in the car, you can't go to work. If you don't go to work, you can't buy groceries or put gas in the car. Those are that's the triangular thinking that the Midwest is famous for. And not educating ourselves into stupid. Good education, but not so educated that you become really stupid.
Well, and I think ultimately we've pulled these phrases, these words, and in all these Midwestern states, it's things like hardworking, common sense. Those messages always rise to the top, regardless of whether it's left or right, Republican, Democrat. And so I think you're onto something, Terry, that that is the Midwestern values. Pritzker can try to change that all he wants, but I don't think he has enough in that bank account to make an entire, as Chris said, decades of history change that. It's going to take a lot more money than that. All right, let's go to our last topic here. So, again, not a bastion of conservative thought. CNN released a poll over the last week that showed that the favorability of the Democratic Party is at an all-time low. I'm going to read a couple stats here. So, I'm going to work top to bottom from this article and just read a couple key stats, and then I'll let you guys react to this. So, 58% majority of Democrats and Democrat-leaning independents say that the Democratic Party needs major changes. That number was only 34 after the 22 midterms. So over the last 2 years, that number has jumped from 34 to 58. Let's see. Let me go to the next one here. Overall, just 33% of all Americans express a favorable view of the Democratic Party, an all-time low in their polling dating back to 1992. Now, Republicans, it's only at 36% favorability, so let's not go crazy here. However, again, a good sign. Another one I want to point to here. Where is it? Here we go. 35% say that it's a problem that Democrats aren't trying to help enough people, but 38% say that they're trying to help too many of the wrong type of people, which you're going to see as we hear the conversation about welfare really pick up. It's going to be one of the big fights out of DC about where that money is actually going to. It's going to be a big topic in the coming months, so keep those numbers in mind. The last thing here is just kind of in general. Across party lines, the dominant political mood is one of discontent. Most U.S. adults, 70% say that they're disappointed, 64% say that they're frustrated with today's politics, half say that they're burned out, 4 in 10 say that they're angry. And the last one here I'll say is that among political independents, each party's favorability rating is only 19. So again, let's not cheer and say that, wow, Republicans, people love Republicans. That's not true. But at least at this point, they like Democrats the least they ever have. Now we need some work to make them actually like our side, but this is progress that the numbers for Democrats have cratered, and we can certainly work from that. So who's got thoughts here?
I mean, I think that we've talked about it, the last couple of episodes, really, that I think the Democrats are kind of having a little bit of an identity crisis right now, especially at the federal level, because they don't really know how to respond to Trump and what the best path forward is. I mean, you see some of these bills that have come up for a vote. I mean, Lake and Riley Act, you had 30, 40 Democrats that voted with the Republicans on this bill, but then you have other Democrats out there, saying that this bill is racist and it's a problem. And you've got Pritzker out there saying that we're not going to comply with, federal immigration enforcement. So I think that's part of what you're seeing in these stats is that the Democrats just don't know who they are. They don't know what they're about. And when you are kind of all over the map, then you end up just pissing everybody off because you have the far left that's like, well, they don't think that Democrats are doing a good job of standing up to Trump. And then you have the more moderate members that are aggravated that people like AOC and Ilhan Omar are making the statements that they are. So everybody's just aggravated and disappointed.
Fair. I mean, the 4 in 10 that said they're angry, that number rose to 52% amongst Democratic aligned women. So I think that lends credence to what you're saying there, Michael.
I think the easiest way for the Republican Party to take advantage of this situation is discipline. Because the Democratic Party is going to try and dig themselves out of this grave by attacking the Republicans. Because the Democratic Party is aware that the Republican Party isn't really that much more favorable than them either. People like you're just saying in that poll, Collin, it's not like the American people suddenly love the Republican Party and hate the Democratic Party. No, they're pretty much still the same where they were with the Republican Party, maybe slightly better. They're just upset with the Democratic Party. So the Republican Party needs to be disciplined because a similar situation happened, after the 72 election where the Democratic Party was a joke, McGovern just got smoked. But where the Democrats dug them out of this was through Watergate. And that was the whole comeback of the Democratic Party. They won the presidency in 76. And the Republicans have to stay disciplined. They can't make any stupid mistakes. They have to stay on message. They have to stay positive. Because if they start going negative and start flailing around, it allows the Democratic Party to come back through their own negative messaging while we start flailing around as well. And now the American people see, I hate the Republican Party too. These Democrats, they suck, but I'm going to vote for them in 2026 because look at those stupid Republicans. So Republican Party has to stay disciplined. on message and avoid stupid mistakes in order to be successful with the Democratic Party cratering.
Yeah, I mean, we see this, right? You see, Susan, I know, just thinking Champaign County. I mean, the Ammons family and the constant failures of their political dynasty. I mean, I can understand why the favorability of Democrats is the lowest it's ever been. But we as Republicans obviously have our work ahead of us, right? I mean, it's not that that the voters love us, but you know what? The door is now open. They're so frustrated with the other side. This is our opportunity here, where we can show them that there's a better alternative, and it may be the first opportunity we've had in a while. So I don't know whether it's Champaign County or whether it's statewide. It's whatever we do. This is our chance now to show people that we can be the governing adults in the room who can do things better.
Yeah, I think we have to really, really focus on messaging over the next, 6 to 8 months, especially during the upcoming municipal elections, because I know there was a comment made that, national issues don't really, work on the local level, but I will tell you that when in the last election, when Terrence Stuber was running against Aaron Ammons, there were people that were feeding lines to the students that if Terrence won, that he would take away abortion rights in Champaign County. And there are people that are that they just don't know and don't understand it. So I think that the Republican Party really, especially in Illinois, we have got to get some really solid messaging. And obviously we have to alter it when, you're a place like Palatine, it's different from Champaign and it's different from Collinsville. So you do have to alter it some, but we need to have a common messaging system for the entire, platform. And it needs to be, basically nested in with the national platform, and we need to go all in, and we need to get the message out that we're not xenophobic because we want illegal immigrants to be shipped back home if they're raping people and killing people. We need to push life, not necessarily pro-life, because I don't know if that's a winning message in Illinois. But what is a winning message is that we want babies that are born to be able to live, or at least not suffer, right? We also want to help women that want to have babies. We want to help them to have a baby and not be pushed into having an abortion because they're poor or because they don't have a good living situation. These are all things that we have winning messages, but we as a party have to do a better job at really coalescing around the national platform and then tailoring it to our specific counties so that we actually can win some of these local races and get rid of this super majority in the state house. Because until we get rid of that super majority, we cannot fix some of these heinous laws that we have in this state that are driving people away.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Susan's with the mic drop moment on our final agenda topic. I mean, we've been crying on these podcasts for now 88 episodes for some form of messaging and a solid platform that this state could all get behind as the Republican Party. And it's something that we need. It's something we've needed for a long time. Unfortunately, I've been doing politics in the state for almost 20 years, and I've been begging for this for almost 20 years. So maybe this time around we'll actually do it, but it would be a theme and a solid message that then you could translate for Champaign County versus Lake County versus Sangamon County, but you have that solid foundation that all of us Republicans agree to in the state. That's how we do it in other states, but yeah, God forbid somebody listen and actually do it the right way in Illinois, but I'll get off my high horse. All right, let's move on to our final topics. We'd like to have some fun with this, as our viewers and listeners will know. We end with our OG and Clown of the Week. This is our segment where if you've got somebody you want to give some praise to over the last week or so in politics, or anybody that you want to give some scorn to, anybody is open to give any nominations that they'd like. The floor is yours. Who you got?
Well, I was going to say sorry. I was going to say on OG of the week, and I alluded to it earlier, but our three Illinois rock stars that are going to be part of Trump's cabinet. We're going to have Small Business Administration, Housing and Urban Development, and CIA, especially John Ratcliffe, because he's a Southern Illinoisan, and we're proud to have somebody from the 12th Congressional District go into D.C. to clean things up.
Congrats. I know you also had another one from the congressional delegation, right?
Oh, yeah. Congressman Mike Bost was the chair whenever they voted on the Lake and Riley Act in Congress. So that was a big deal as well. And we're excited about that.
Well said, thoughts. Michael starting us off with positivity. I like it.
You want me to do clown of the week next?
Go for
I can
it.
just say it. Well, I was gonna do like more like clown show of the week, and it is a tag team of JB Pritzker and Brandon Johnson, because they continue to just go round and round fighting each other. And you've got to give a special shout out to the vice president of the CTU that said that Pritzker was a racist for criticizing Brandon Johnson. So
yeah, Jackson Potter is always good for a quote or two. Yeah.
I know we've been dealing with a lot of infighting on our side of the aisle, but the Democrats have their fair share of it as well. So let's just take advantage of it.
Well, you mentioned Brandon Johnson. He's one of mine. By the way, he still has not amended his T2 from Q4. So his $200,000 that he supposedly has still hasn't been amended. And it's now officially, 8 days late? And I'm sure it will be even more late. So we'll check it each week and see if this, because again, the media never seems to follow up on this stuff. So we'll do it for him.
He's probably trying to get people to backdate checks so he doesn't embarrass himself.
That's right. He's trying to get
What else we got? Who else has something?
I have a clown of the week. You go, Sharon. You were trying to get in earlier. I'll let you.
Sorry. So my clown of the week, of course, is JB Pritzker. Being a police officer, his comment about the about face of the Republican Party that used to be law and order is now a party of chaos and disorder. Of course, he took that from somebody else because he can't think for himself, and stands against law enforcement. Okay, the man who personally pushed the Safety Act that took away how many powers of the police, and he's accusing the Republicans of being anti-law enforcement. Donald Trump was the only president that ever showed up at every single year at the National Law Enforcement Memorial. Not George Bush every 4 years. I mean, every single year. Not only Donald Trump, but Mike Pence was there too. Every single year. We never saw that with any other president. Everybody sent their whoever, but it was never the president, never the vice president. So if anybody's, and that was also the first time the White House went blue. They Obama put all, 50 million colors up for the gay community, but God forbid they make the White House blue. So that was one of the things he said. The other thing he said was because the billionaires were in the front seat, he said, I'm sorry, this is just funny, that there's a reason they're making nice because they hope to become greater billionaires. If that's not the pot calling the kettle
it was one of my
black.
clowns too, was JB Pritzker for complaining about these billionaires and the influence that they have in our U.S. politics. Meanwhile, JB Pritzker is only the governor of Illinois because of the fact that he's a billionaire. It's the only reason he's there. And yet this is our hypocritical governor. He will say anything, including now chastising the fact that I can't believe these billionaires have influence in our politics. Yeah, he was one of my clowns for that exact same quote.
I had to laugh. And that was that, and then his accusation about Elon Musk with the comment. Well, Elon Musk has been very public about the fact he's autistic. And so making fun of a disability person is really off the cuff. I mean, that to me is offensive.
It's JB Pritzker and Stacey Davis Gates basically making fun of those with special needs. Meanwhile, God, if a Republican even made a hint at a joke like that or a comment like that, we'd be pilloried, but whatever. Who else has thoughts?
That was it.
So my clown of the week is in an absolute terrible look for Episcopalianism. My clown of the week is the Bishop of Washington, Marion Edgar Buddy, Bud. I don't know how to pronounce your last name. The Episcopal Bishop of Washington, who decided to utilize her sermon at the Washington National Cathedral on Election Day in order to preach to Trump about LGBT issues, immigration issues, talk about various other leftist agendas, and an absolute terrible look for what is supposed to be the default religion of America, and American Anglicanism. So absolutely terrible look. Trump looked to social media, called her a bunch of names. Very, very funny stuff here. Another win for Catholicism over Episcopalianism, everybody. Excellent job.
Hey, I heard she's got a new book out. She's got to try to sell some copies. I think that at the end of the day, that's what it's all about.
And you
So
got to
I-
add
my
in that
clown-
she went on Rachel Maddow, and she went on multiple shows
She's
as
on The
well.
View,
You,
too. Yeah.
yeah, ridiculous.
I'm gonna run this in really fast because I think my battery is about to go dead here. My clown of the week is actually I think is going to be Latoya Hughes, the director of the Department of Corrections, for sending out direction to have her staff order her staff to violate federal law. And I would say I have two OGs of the week. The first, one of my favorite OGs is always going to be Mike Boss, to Michael's point. And Mike will say a lot of times in his speeches, who would have ever thought that this truck driver's son from Southern Illinois would do, and then Mike will name, different things that he's done. But to be standing at the podium when the Lake and Riley law is being passed, made me tear up, because I've known Mike for 40 years. Sometimes we agree, sometimes we disagree. Most of the time we agree. Maybe we have a different route to get there, but it was just awesome to see him standing there and doing that. And my other OG of the week is Carrie Underwood. I've done a little singing in my past, and my daughter is a great singer. My granddaughter's a great singer. That's a very hard song to do, and doing something a cappella is really, really hard. So when she jumped right in and did exactly what she had to do, never missed a note, was right on key. That's a tough thing to do. And she was not just a professional, she was a superstar Hall of Fame OG this week.
Well, and I'm not ashamed to say, my wife knows it. She chuckles and enjoys it, that Carrie Underwood is on my list. She is just absolutely talented and gorgeous. But I love to see how down to earth she was. I mean, you think about some of those prima donnas where it's like, if they came up and said, you don't have any music, they would have just thrown a hissy fit. And she's like, all right, I got it. I'm good. No worries. I'll handle it. And then no auto-tune. She doesn't need it. She is just a very, very talented human being. And she showed it there. I thought that was cool.
And my clown is Amy Klobuchar for not making sure the music was there for Carrie Underwood, and also not allowing Trump's family to get fully in place before they started doing the oath. I mean, there were so many little subtle things that she did so poorly in the organization of the actual inauguration that, thank God we have a president now. But my goodness, there were just so many little things. And from a military standpoint, I'm like, why did you not rehearse this? Why did you not get it set up properly? I mean, no music for a huge star like that is so unacceptable in an event like this.
Well, and Justice Roberts
for
didn't
sure.
help that either.
All right, I'll quickly do mine
sorry.
because I know we're way over. So OG, Senator Wilcox filed his no tax on tips bill, which I thought was kind of fun and kind of a cool bill to file, riding on that wave nationally. So I think it's an OG nomination for me. Michael already mentioned Amy Murray Briel getting trolled by Cat Fax of all things. So that's certainly clown worthy for her. If even Rich Miller is clowning you, then you know you're clown of the week. Also, pay attention to Naperville District 203, the school board. Melissa Kelly Black is a super progressive who was elected to that school board and is showing just the dysfunction that happens when you elect these progressives to local government. It's a body full of Democrats. They're all Democrats on that board, I believe, if not most of them. And they just like it's becoming like Thornton Township at this point, complete disaster there. So if you want to see an indication on April 1st of what your municipal body could look like, or local government body could look like if you let the progressives win every seat, go check out Naperville District 203. Let's see here. Last one else. No, I covered them all. I'm good. I've got a couple others, but we don't have time, so I'll move on. Closing thoughts. I'm going to have you go first, Terry, just in case you lose power. So go ahead, Terry, your final
Yeah,
thoughts.
I just would like to say to everybody, keep an eye on what happens. Next week, we're back in Springfield again, and I would expect some more Trump-proofing attempts. I think you're going to hear some very vocal Republicans in the legislature, and hopefully Trump is coming to the rescue. So my thoughts are, please come. ICE, please start in the Illinois Department of Corrections.
There you go. Susan, I'm so glad that you were with us this week. Your final thoughts.
So my final thoughts is that it is time for Republicans to have courage. We now have the leader. We now have, the House, the Senate. We have the majority. And so we can no longer be silent. We can no longer worry about losing jobs, losing, all of that. We have the backing of the government now. So it's time to have the courage and use our voice and support our president and try to flip some of these counties back to where they need to be.
I like it. Sharon, your final thoughts.
I'm going to add one OG, which would be our vice president. Where else can you be a hillbilly and be brought up by an abusive, addicted mother, able to fund yourself through Yale Law School and become the vice president of the United States? Now, to me, that is the epitome of the United States of America.
Amen, sister.
Yes.
I like it. All right, we're down to Michael and Chris. And Michael, your final thoughts.
All right. Well, I have two things. So Brendan Moore with the Pantograph, he put out a tweet earlier this week where he showed Trump's overperformance in some of these congressional districts in Illinois compared to the down ballot. There's congressional districts where Trump outperformed the congressional candidate by as many as 7 points. So we as Republicans need to be looking at those numbers and figure out, okay, where are our opportunities moving forward, because they're out there. And then the second thing I would say is that as Republicans, we have to be prepared, especially over the course of the next 2 years, to have conversations with people, because we're going to be getting attacks lobbed at us from Democrats and the news media. And when you're, at the barbershop, the coffee shop, the liquor hut, wherever you are, you have to be prepared to defend President Trump and what the Republicans are doing, and be able to push back against what the Democrats are doing, because people are going to be talking about it, and we can't let these attacks go unconfronted.
My life is so unfulfilled.
Amen.
I have no liquor hut in my community, and I feel
Chris has been to the liquor hut. It's in Terry's district.
I've been to the liquor hut.
All right, Chris, you woke up from your slumber this week. You get the final word. What do you got?
Friends, the golden age of America is upon us. Now, over these next 2 to 4 years, you're going to hear rhinos and naysayers tell you that it can't be done. America's screwed. The Republicans are going to get steamrolled in 2 years or 4 years. Illinois is a lost cause. Well, I'm here to tell you, to tell the naysayers to go screw themselves, because this is the golden age of America. People like Collin Corbett, they're going to tell you it can't be done. I'm here to tell you Donald Trump, President Donald Trump, needs your support. And if we have that support and we stay disciplined and we don't let the Pat Brady's of the world and the dirty Dems, like Butler likes to call them, get on our backs, we can make real change in the state of Illinois. So just prove the naysayers wrong. Don't ever give up, because if you give up, they win. So don't ever give up. God bless America.
Amen.
Another mic drop moment. At a time when I'm getting unprecedented number of texts and direct messages that I'm being too positive and too favorable, Chris is trying to pretend like the opposite is true, but I think he's just desperately looking for me to fire him. So we'll see if what happens this next week. Anyways, thank you everybody for watching. Thank you everyone for listening. To Lane Davis, our producer, thanks for your hard work. We will catch you all next week on the Smoke-Filled Room. In the meanwhile, go out there and kick some butt. We'll see you soon.